Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it's great. We're almost Memorial Day weekend, which means we're almost to summer, which means we're almost to fall, which means it's almost football season.
And it's like you can almost touch it. You can just reach out and touch it. Like it's the heat wave on the roads. You see it. It's like, oh, I'm going to get there, but you can never quite get there. But the magazines are going to be out soon, so that's good. That's always a great sign. It's the best time of year, other than when the football is actually happening. That's actually the best time. Talking about it is one of the good times of the year, but actually having it be here, that's the best time.
Mm-hmm. Actually getting to watch it is the best. Talking about it is still pretty good. Oh, yeah, we're only we're a week away from the craziest month in college football history, and then 3 weeks after that, it's Big Ten Media Days time, and a couple weeks after that, it's fall camp time, and then you're a month from the start of the season.
If I have to do any work during June, I'm going to be angry. Like this should be everybody else should just be, I shouldn't have to do it. I shouldn't have to lift a finger.
The whole month of Morning Scoop is just going to be going, okay, who committed today? Okay, great. I'll have someone on to talk about that. Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Who left? Who's here? Who left? No. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Boom. It's just going to run itself, and I'll just sit back and just enjoy it. Like, watch some TV, find some shows on Netflix that I haven't been able to watch. And just, June is for Tony. That's going to be my motto. June is for Tony, and just relax, take it easy. And then July, okay, I'll get back to work in July. That's fine. I'll get back to working. But June, that's for me. And then, of course, Ohio State recruiting. But I'm looking forward to it. Before we get there, though, Tom, we have to finish up on our series we started previously, looking at the Ohio State freshmen, the freshman class. Last show, we did the freshmen on the offense. Today, we'll be talking about the freshmen on the defense, including Australian punter Jesse Mirco, and just give our thoughts on what we expect from them this year, what we've seen, what we've heard. Same thing we did last show, except this time we'll be talking about defensive guys. And as Tom promised on the last show, it might get a little irresponsible here in a little bit. But before we get there, let's talk about Jantzen Dunn, freshman safety out of, I believe, Bowling Green, Kentucky, the second best Bowling Green in America, frankly. Bowling Green, Ohio, as we know, is the best Bowling Green. Bowling Green, Kentucky, I can only assume is the only other Bowling Green. There's probably others, but I can make them number two.
There's a subway stop at the bottom of the one line in Manhattan, down very close to the World Trade Center. Like might be between the World Trade Center and the Statue of Liberty, that is Bowling Green. So that's also pretty good, but it's not as big as Bowling Green, Ohio or Kentucky. Exactly.
Is there a university there on your subway line?
Not that I can recall. No, it has been a minute since I've been there, but no.
Okay. Yes, as you stand online for your subway.
Glad you finally got it right. Go ahead.
So Jansen Dunn, a guy who the first time I got to see his highlights, it's looks like your prototypical free safety. He was a 3-star guy early on, maybe bumped up finally to a 4-star guy. But you watch him, and there's I think he could play corner if they needed him to, but obviously he was this spring the number 3 free safety behind Josh Proctor and Bryson Shaw. So he's a guy that I guess probably redshirts. Although, Tom, if you want him competing for the job next year, because Josh Proctor is going to be gone, like if you want him competing with, say, Bryson Shaw or maybe even Lathan Ransom next year, like maybe he's the guy that you try to play as much as you can this year because you're going to need him next year.
I think we're going to know a lot about exactly how close they think he is to Bryson Shaw right now in terms of 2 versus 3. Because, coming in your freshman year, Bryson Shaw's been here a couple of years. If you got a 2-year head start on a guy, you should be way ahead of him in that guy's first spring. If Jansen Dunn has closed that gap this fall, then yeah, I think you might see them not redshirt him, because you're not necessarily ever planning on getting 5 years out of a guy outside of maybe offensive linemen, people who you need to bulk up a lot, maybe tight ends. There's not a lot of, Ohio State does not put out a ton of 5th-year players, mostly because a lot of their guys after 3 years are like, that's when you're making your NFL decision. And after 4 years, it's like, you're definitely making your NFL decision after 4 years. 5th-year guys, if you're a fifth-year contributor at Ohio State, it's like, why are you still here? Like you should be playing in the NFL now. What's wrong with you? So yeah, I think it's possible he redshirts, but they are probably going to make that determination coming out of fall camp. Is he close enough to Bryson Shaw that it's worth making that, burning that red shirt? I think it's a possibility that he is, because he's also, the kind of guy that might be a special teams guy where, again, we talked about this with a couple guys in the previous show. If you're going to be on special teams, then okay, well, then you might as well play him on 6 games on defense instead of 4 because you're already burning the red shirt.
And we've seen other guys. Josh Proctor played as a true freshman as a free safety backup. Jordan Fuller did it before him. Maybe that's something that Jantzen Dunn just follows along with. And again, the special teams opportunity will be there as well. Another special teams opportunity for Reid Carrico, freshman linebacker out of Ironton, and a guy who we got to see a little bit of this spring, right before we were getting kicked out of one practice. At least I was there. You were there with that one as well when he got an interception at the end of practice, or maybe that wasn't.
I think so.
I think a bad pass from maybe Kyle McCord, but we don't want to throw anybody under a bus. But a guy who seems like a future starter to me. It won't be this year because of the 3. There's 3 seniors, linebackers ahead of him. A guy that I don't know that he needs to redshirt, and I think there's a role for him. They're not that deep at linebacker, even though if we're just talking like, is it just a Will and the Mike? Like I think he can play Sam the same way that Kayvon Pope plays Sam, or Baron Browning has. Like he's a good enough athlete to do some different things. He's not the Pete Werner Sam, but just depending on what they do with their linebackers this year, I think there could be a role for him. I don't know that he would need to play more than the 4 games though, because I think we've seen instances where you're the number 2, but you still are able to redshirt because you didn't get enough opportunities to play. So that'll be something to watch with him. But like what he does this year, I don't think impacts his potential. Like if he redshirts, don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. And he's someone who, again, you've got the starters. They're pretty high on Tommy Eichenberg as one of the guys behind those starters. How many reps are you going to get on defense? But then you go back and you think about like a lot of those freshmen, a lot of those 4th-year linebackers played on special everyone remembers Taraja Mitchell with the big hit on kickoff coverage his freshman year. That's a spot, you want guys who are, kind of big and fast to, on all your kick coverage units and that kind of stuff. A lot of times that's linebackers and safeties and people like that. So you may burn that red shirt just on special teams. And he's not someone who I think is probably going to be a 5-year guy at Ohio State. He seems like the kind of guy who should be able to come in and, even if you play just mostly special teams this year, you're in the running for a starting job in your sophomore year. You probably win a starting job either your sophomore or junior year. And then, maybe you play 3 years, maybe you play 4 years, and then, off to the NFL. That's not a spot where they're probably going to have a lot of 50-year guys. That just hasn't been how that has typically worked for them.
It'd be the Pete Werner track where you don't redshirt as a freshman, but you're not in a lot of action, but then you win a job as a sophomore and you're a 3-year starter.
Mm-hmm.
And, Taraja Mitchell, Dallas Gant, Kayvon Pope didn't redshirt either, and they're still waiting for their first year as a starter. So they can go one of a series of different ways. Let's talk about Denzel Burke, number 29 in your program, cornerback out of Arizona. A really interesting story in that he wasn't able to visit Ohio State. Like I think Ryan Day got a look at him early on before everything got shut down. Like got to see him in person. Somebody from Ohio State got to see him in person, but there is still a question about would we accept his commitment? Were the coaches convinced he could play corner because they didn't get him to work out on campus? They didn't really get a great look at him. And there are other guys that they were looking at as well who they told no until we get to see on campus. They finally decided, okay, we'll take your commitment. A guy who played, I think, more receiver than corner, but Matt Barnes raved about his feet and called him natural. And I think he said innate abilities where it's just the natural ability to be the corner. Some guys have it, some guys don't. They saw enough from Denzel Burke. They believe he has that. I don't know that he's one of 3 corners that Ohio State signed this year. He's the only one, though, that enrolled early. So he's got a leg up on Jakailin Johnson and Jordan Hancock, which is good. With how thin that position is, I don't know that any of those guys redshirt. Can Denzel Burke get into that too deep? Does he redshirt? I think you play them all.
You almost have to, because as many questions as they have at corner right now. I mean, Seven Banks wasn't in the spring game this spring, but it sounds like he'll be fine coming back for the fall. And I think everyone's sort of penciling him as the number 1 corner. Behind him, it's like, well, Cam Brown is coming off an injury that is typically a very difficult injury for corners to come back from. So I guess you pencil him in at number 2, but it's like, definitely use pencil and not pen. Tyleik Johnson just left. I mean, and then you're getting into Legend Cavazos, Brian Watson. I mean, I know they like those guys a lot, but you haven't really seen a whole heck of a lot out of either of them. So, that's not a lot of depth. And one guy gets hurt, and then you're really leaning on some of those freshmen then. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't know that I expect any of them to redshirt. Odds are one of them does. I don't know which one it is, just because you're not probably going to be playing them all 3 at the same time. But I just, that's a spot where it's very difficult to get on the field as a freshman. If you're playing a ton of freshmen, either you have like an incredible freshman class or you have a real thin defensive back room. Ohio State right now has a pretty thin cornerback room. That's not a great thing, but I don't expect any of them to have like great seasons, but I think you could probably expect all of them to be on the field a decent amount.
Yeah, and I wrote about this before with Denzel Burke, where Ohio State has gone and gotten good corners who are great receivers, and I guess great corners who are also great receivers. Marshawn Lattimore, Garyon Conley, Denzel Ward, like Bradley Roby was a Vanderbilt wide receiver commit, and so it's something that Kerry Combs is completely comfortable with doing, and not that he'll be hands on, but it's not unusual to have a wide receiver / corner become an outstanding corner. Ohio State has a great history with that, including Chris Gamble, but we don't need to talk about that. Tom, the next guy, number 33, defensive end, Jack Sawyer.
Over.
Go.
Over. Yeah, I mean, this is one of these guys who sometimes you look at the recruiting rankings and it's like, what is this? What is the consensus among the recruiting community about what this player is? And it's like, okay, 5-star, top 5 player in the nation. Mark Givler and Bill Green were both talking about him as being potentially the best player in the state of Ohio as a sophomore. That was a time when Paris Johnson was still a high school player in Ohio. Like, that's real good. That's like real good. Okay. How is he in terms of athletic ability? Like, people talk about him and, his bend and his flexibility and ability to get around the corner and his quickness. It's like, okay, check that box. Okay. Well, what's his work ethic like? And it's okay. Like, every time we hear, every time Nevada drops one of his, nuggets from inside Ohio State practice, it's always, hey, Jack Sawyer is like blowing people away right now, like blowing people away with his work ethic. And it's like, okay, yes, but can he put it all together on the field? And he only had 4 sacks in the spring game. And, yes, Solomon Thomas, yes, Bam Childress, yes. Okay. If you're on the field as a true freshman and just annihilating people, like, even if they're just, here's the other freshmen who are going against me, and I'm just constantly beating them. And, he had 4 sacks, and there were a couple more that were like, yeah, you might have called that a sack, or you might have been close enough to, like, okay, I've seen enough. Like, he's not going to start at the start of this year, but he's probably in that rotation. He might be in the top 4 of that rotation. He might be ahead for the Minnesota game. He might be ahead of guys who've been on this roster for 3-4 years, who you think of as good defensive ends who are going to be, significant contributors this year. He might be ahead of some of those guys. And, I always in my mind set the responsible over under for a, outstanding true freshman defensive end at 3 sacks. Like, that's just the that's basically where Chase Young ended up. That's basically where Zach Harrison ended up. That's basically where Nick Bosa ended up, I think. It's just, that's about where you end up because you don't have a lot of, you don't get that many snaps because it's a deep and talented room and Larry Johnson rotates a lot. And there's just, it's hard to sack a quarterback. Like that is not an easy thing to do. Where would you set the over-under for Jack Sawyer's sacks this fall? Because I feel like it's like
5.5.
I was going to say 6.5. I mean, and look, he is not going to break Chase Young's sack record this year. Like he's not going to break the single season school sack record this year. Probably. But is that well within range? Is that either, he's in that range or he's getting the Joey Bosa triple team treatment in a year or two? Like, yeah, either of those I would believe.
I believe Nick Bosa had 5 sacks in 2016, and Chase Young and Zach Harrison both had 3.5 their freshman seasons. So, the way things are going right now, he's also a tremendous basketball player, arguably the best basketball player in the state when he was playing. So that gives you an idea of all of these different things that he's putting together. And another guy who missed his senior season of football, opted out because at one point it looked like, remember spring football, Big Ten spring football was going to be a thing, and maybe the freshmen would get to play, and so he opted out. And also, Ohio high school football was a mess at that point. Wasn't sure if that was going to happen, so he opted out. And it's not like he just sat around; like he's working every day on pass rush moves and things of that nature, working on his hands, all this stuff that not working with Larry Johnson, but Larry, I'm sure Larry Johnson probably passed on maybe some spreadsheets or, some printed out some items for him or something of that nature to where here's what we'd like you to work on. And so then, okay, there's 24 hours a day. I only need to sleep 2 hours a day. So that's 22 hours a day of work that I can do to prepare for what will eventually be his job at Ohio State. And I'm with you. There are a ton of seniors, 3 fourth-year guys on the defensive end, and Tyler Friday and Tyreek Smith and Javonte Jean-Baptiste. And while I expect Tyreek Smith and Zach Harrison to be the starters and the other 2 will be in that rotation, the production isn't there. So if Jack Sawyer can come in and produce, he can be the number 3. He can be the number 2. Zach Harrison started a game as a true freshman. Javonte Jean-Baptiste started as a redshirt freshman a game. So Jack Sawyer starting a game this season wouldn't shock me at all. Maybe starting 3 or more would be I shouldn't say surprise, but if he's starting 3 or more games, then that tells you like he's Nick Bosa. And even Nick Bosa only started like 7 games or 10 games in his career.
Yeah, and Javonte Jean-Baptiste started, I believe, in
Rutgers.
At Rutgers. He's a New Jersey guy. It was kind of a little bit of a, nice, hey, you're back home kind of start. Well, Jack Sawyer's from Columbus. So, do you think Larry Johnson will give Jack Sawyer hey, well, we're playing in Columbus, so we'll let you start in your hometown. Like I could, I can see that happening at some point this year. And yeah, it's just, you don't want to put too much pressure on a kid who's 18 years old. It's just like, that's not fair. You got to kind of let guys get there themselves, develop their own, find their own path, you're not going to have 15 sacks as a true freshman. Like that's not a realistic number to put out there for anyone, but like all the boxes, like literally all the boxes that are there to be checked, he checks every single one of them. And you got Larry Johnson coaching you, who is it's just an assembly line at this point of guys who just, okay, next man up coming off that edge. Like there's, we go through, position groups and like, what's the big position group concern this year for Ohio State? Somehow it's never a defensive line. Like it's never, ever a defensive line, especially defensive end. Like there was a point a few years ago where it was like, yeah, they're a little thin at tackle. It is never defensive end. Never, ever, ever. Larry Johnson just keeps pumping those guys off an assembly line and they all produce. And yeah, I see no reason to think Jack Sawyer won't just be the next guy there and potentially live up to or maybe exceed that standard.
Well, even last year when it was like kind of a question, like what about defensive tackle? It becomes a strength. Mm-hmm. And just, not quite out of the blue, but pretty much out of the blue. So Tom, if I go over under on sacks for Jack Sawyer in the season opener against Michigan at 0.5, I'm taking the over. I think he's going to show up game 1.
Okay, the season opener against Minnesota?
Yes.
Okay, you said the season opener against Michigan.
Did I?
You
No,
did.
that was last year.
Okay, I was just thinking. I'm like, which game did he mean? Okay, yeah, season opener against Minnesota. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about it, and it's a true freshman, and yeah, I think Ohio State is probably up by enough in that game, probably that Minnesota's throwing the ball more, and yeah, I'll take the. I will take. I'm definitely not taking the under. Like I could take a push there, or I could take an over. Like I have, 0.5 is not an automatic. Like it's an over or under. Like it might be a push there, but yeah, I mean, I'll take the over.
The over under on sacks against Michigan would be 1.5, just for future reference.
Yeah, I'm probably. I mean, we haven't gotten to the Michigan in the team preview series yet, but I don't think they've got super fantastic tackles. So yeah, I might go over there.
All right. So let's stick with the defensive line. Let's go to a big defensive tackle, Tyleik Williams, who I believe checked in around 6'3", 330 pounds this spring for the Buckeyes. Just a big dude. And he's bigger than anybody else when you look at him. Like you see him out on the field, or even because he was injured a little bit this spring, even when he's standing alone, you can still tell he's bigger than like everybody else because he's just a big, like your prototypical nose tackle type guy, but quick and powerful, and isn't just this, I don't go anywhere, I just keep people from going someplace. Like he's the guy that can also move. This year, like I thought for sure he would play, but as we talked to the defensive line more this spring, where they're saying like, everybody's going to be able to play nose tackle or 3 technique, that kind of increases the depth where maybe Haskell Garrett or Teron Vincent is a nose tackle, along with Antoine Jackson, along with Ty Hamilton, along with Jerron Cage. I don't know that you need Tyleik. I don't think you need him this year. Does that mean you just let him play his 4 games, get his experience in, and then, because you could have a 5th-year defensive tackle, probably if they're that good, you won't. And if you're around too long, scouts are kind of like, what's wrong with you? Like if you stick around too long, but Haskell Garrett is doing it. He's sticking around for his 5th year. So, I mean, it does happen. And with him, I don't think there's a reason to play him this year, but if he does play, that's like a Jonathan Hankins type of thing where it's like, whoa, he's just some 3-star big guy, had to lose some weight, and he's already making plays for the Buckeyes now. Tyleik Williams, I believe, was a top 100-ish, 150 type player. So he's a high 4-star guy. And if he's playing, that's, I would be surprised. But if he's playing early, then that's a really good sign.
I'm right there with you. I don't expect him to do more than play that 4 games because I don't think they're going to need him to. And there's no real reason to burn a red shirt. I mean, you can always, you can't get that red shirt season back later. So, you can always just leave. You can leave as a redshirt junior. That is the thing you can do. You can leave as a redshirt sophomore. Big Daddy Wilkinson did that. He's and I think Ohio State goes back and regrets not playing him in his freshman year. But if there's not a reason to play him this year, and you don't need him in terms of depth, like I don't know that you need to burn that. I feel like we'd have a better idea exactly where he stands if he had played in the spring game. He obviously didn't play in the spring game, so that leaves us a little bit of a little bit in the dark as far as exactly where he is on that depth chart and what he looks like on the field. But I don't expect him to play a ton this fall just because they don't really need him there. But a year from now, I would expect him to be someone who's in that rotation.
Let's stay on the defensive tackle spot then with Mike Hall, who is more of a 3-tech guy, did not enroll early. So he's a little bit behind. However, I wonder if maybe his path to maybe his path to the field is a little bit easier. But, again, even if Haskell Garrett and Teron Vincent are playing together and they're sharing time at both spots or whatever, you still you've got Noah Potter in there as well. And, I don't know. I think it might be easier for Mike Hall to see the field this year than Tyleik Williams, even though he's enrolling later. But I also don't think there is a reason to. Like, you don't need to play Mike Hall, who's also tremendous athlete, really good basketball player, just a mobile guy. So these are two guys that you'd like to just keep them together every step of the way. Like him and Tyleik Williams. Let's redshirt them both, get them both their 4 games. No reason to blow a redshirt year this year when you've got Haskell Garrett and Teron Vincent, and Antoine Jackson can play either of the defensive tackle spots. And how much rushman are you going to play where Tyler Friday and Tyreek Smith or Zach Harrison are playing defensive tackle and passing down? So I think there's going to be a lot of that as well. So you can get away with playing fewer defensive tackles than you might normally. And so I think there's, again, just like we were saying with Tyleik Williams, no reason to burn Mike Hall's redshirt this year, especially for a guy who's a late enrollee, on-time enrollee,
And he's someone who you talk to our guys who do scouting stuff, and they talk about him as like this really underappreciated part of this class that, I think he was top 50, top 60 kind of player nationally, which, most schools would look at that and that's the highest ranked player in our class. And then Ohio State, it's like, oh yeah, that guy, I forgot about him, but he's someone who our guys who scout Ohio talk about him in glowing terms in terms of what he could be as a player and what he is already as a player. But if you don't come in for spring, I think you kind of have to assume you're going to redshirt. It is very, very hard to come in the summer and play as a true freshman. Now, Harry Miller did that a couple of years ago. It's not impossible to do it. And, defensive tackle is, if you're strong enough, potentially you can get on the field there. But that's another spot where, the depth is there that they don't necessarily have to do it. Maybe a year with Coach Mick probably benefits him before he's on the field in big games kind of situations. So just based on the fact that he's not here, wasn't here in the spring, I think the safe assumption is play 4 games and then take a red shirt. But I mean, it wouldn't shock me if he was someone who got into that rotation, mid to late part of the year.
Yeah, like a Teron Vincent or Haskell Garrett, like Teron Vincent his freshman year, where he was getting some snaps in there, some meaningful snaps at the end of his freshman year. So let's go to the secondary, Tom. Start with Jakailin Johnson, corner out of St. Louis, who, again, did not enroll early. I think they would have loved to have had both him and Jordan Hancock enrolled early this spring to get them as much of a head start as possible to competing for a job. I still think, we could even talk about him and Jordan Hancock together, because I think I'm going to be saying the same thing for both of them here, that they could compete for a starting spot, certainly being that 2 deep, and they need to. These are 2 of the top freshmen in the nation. I think, Jakailin Johnson might be number 4 and Jordan Hancock might be number 6, something like that, nationally in the cornerback rankings. Guys that you would expect to not redshirt and maybe just continue to build depth. And then if somebody goes down, like Jeff Okudah was as a true freshman, somebody gets injured or opts out, and now you can step in. But guys that will play as true freshmen here and there, like Seven Banks and Cam Brown did, but maybe more than that. And I think they need to be pushing guys. And if in the process of pushing them, they go past them, you got to play them.
Yeah, I have no disagreement. I'm James Carville in whatever the Will Ferrell movie was. I have no rebuttal. Yep, that's it. You got it. So, yeah, no, they don't have enough depth at corner right now that they can just say, okay, definitely these guys are going to redshirt. And you're ranked high enough that I think the expectation, it's not unrealistic to say these guys can be on the field at some point this year. That's fine. That's not a crazy thing to think. So yeah, I think that's, with as little depth as they have, and questions about Cam Brown and his recovery from the Achilles thing, I think you have to expect one of them to at least be pushing to be in the rotation this year, which means one of them is probably pushing to be a starter next year at least. And maybe that's next year. Both of them are in that 3-corner rotation if they're doing it, and it's Ryan Watson, those 2 guys, or it's Legend Cavazos and those 2 guys, or it's Ryan Watson, Legend Cavazos, and one of those guys, and the other one's kind of pushing for a spot in that rotation as well. I mean, that's the talent is there. Corner is a very difficult spot to get on the field as a true freshman. That's just that is one of the toughest spots to get on the field as a true freshman. But Ohio State has such a shortage of talent there right now that they may be kind of forced to do it.
We'll stick in the secondary with the next guy, who Andre Tarantine out of Tennessee, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, they've basically signed an entire secondary where you've got your two corners, and then the third corner can be a nickel. And then you've got Jansen Dunn as your deep safety and maybe Turrentine as your cover safety / strong safety. And then the next guy, Jaylen Johnson, as a future bullet. But with Andre, like, he again did not enroll early, so we don't know exactly where they will put him, but he's a really good athlete, a guy they liked early on, targeted early on, didn't really care what anybody else was, any other schools that were coming after him. They liked him and went ahead and grabbed him. And a long athlete, probably could play corner at a lot of places, which might make him, that's why I say maybe the cover safety is a good spot for him, because you kind of do have to play corner. So I'll be interested to see where he shows up. But again, a guy, if we are talking about him as a cover safety, like Ohio State has Lathan Ransom, Marcus Williamson, Cameron Martinez there already. If you're talking about him as a deep safety, we already went over who they have there with Josh Proctor and Bryson Shaw and Jantzen Dunn. So right now there's a long road to the field for him, which tells me, like, first you figure out where he's going to be, then of course you redshirt him, get him some time on special teams, maybe 2, 3, 4 games this year. But like, I would be shocked if he doesn't redshirt, just because you got to figure out what he is, and then there's still depth in front of him.
Yeah, I mean, unless he's someone who's one of those like special teams dynamos, I don't see any reason to not redshirt him, because you got, like I said, you've got the depth. Wasn't in for spring. I don't think that's a spot where you're going to come in just expecting to play. Like, you're not coming in demanding to play. This isn't a top 5 player in the country. I mean, that seems very much to me like, unless he is just an absolute assassin on special teams, you're probably taking a redshirt here. Yeah,
and like you said, unless he's Alonzo Shavers, which is a reference only a few of us will remember. But yeah, he'll probably redshirt. I'd say the same thing for Jaylen Johnson. If he's going to, especially if he's going to grow into the bullet, you're talking about a position that has 3 guys in front of him right now in Craig Young and Ronnie Hickman, the nickel bullet, if you will, and then Court Williams, the future of the position. So he's got a lot of guys in front of him. But I know Bill Green and Mark Givler rave about him. I think he's a guy that can cover, but is going to grow into that bullet position. Maybe he's the nickel bullet, like a Ronnie Hickman, like the more safety version of the bullet as opposed to the linebacker version. But then you've got Court Williams, who might be the perfect encapsulation of all of it. So he's going to need some redshirt time, I think.
Well, and again, there's no reason to put him on the field. If you have 3 guys ahead of him, all of whom, are people that you've heard people talk up. I mean, Craig Young is just a freakish athlete. Ronnie Hickman is someone that they have really, really liked since he was in high school. And then Court Williams was the guy who, he blew out his knee last year, or he might have been on the field last year. I mean, I think they loved Court Williams last year. So with 3 guys ahead of him at that spot, there's no real reason to push. So again, put him in the bucket of, unless he's, just so fantastic on special teams that you can't keep him off the field, he's going to, he'll see a little bit of time and take a redshirt year.
Yeah, and if I recall, Court Williams was, I think, the second freshman to lose his black stripe from that class. So
that sounds right.
So now we move to Tom Punter, Jesse Mirco. I expect him to play. What do you think?
I think he's a starter. I don't think they'll be able to keep him off the field, mate.
What makes you say that?
Well, I think he'll be able to drop the ball rugby style inside the 5-yard line, perhaps roll out, do a rugby style kick, keep the ball away from the returner, and have them back there so scared they get the chocolate thunder from down under.
There it is. Any concerns about a poor spring game performance, though?
Okay, I'm going to have to give some actual analysis here. So, yes.
Is it, Tom, maybe because seasons are opposite in Australia? So, you would think he would be his best in the spring, which is very concerning.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, and you've got the Coriolis effect. The water is coming out of the Gatorade jugs in the other direction. I mean, that's you got a lot of conflating factors here that could be concerning. But I think overall, it's not great. But when we are always blessed to be able to watch the punt period of practice. that is always something we're there for. Whenever we're in practice, they are always working on punt. So we got to watch him some during practice, and I don't remember thinking that there were huge issues. I don't remember seeing any like noticeable shanks. So that may have been a little bit of, hey, there's a lot of people here watching me practice all of a sudden, and so that can be a little bit of an adjustment. And you're still learning the game a little bit. He has not played football since he was a little kid. This is something that rugby players do, and they just kind of identify rugby players at the Pro Kick Australia Academy and kind of teach them how to punt, teach them how to kick. So there's a little bit of an adjustment there. Does he get does he have a duck against Oregon? Didn't even mean to do that. Does he have a duck against Oregon? That it's a 23-yard punt and gives Oregon a short field. That's entirely possible. That is something that could absolutely happen. On the whole, long term, I don't think there's any real reason to be concerned yet. I think that may have just been like first time in the stadium, first time doing this in front of fans. I mean, it's not like Pro Kick Australia is kicking in front of 20,000 people. So he might be nervous the first time he has to do it during a real game, but there aren't that many games this year where I think field position is going to be this like huge deciding factor. And the other side of this is if Ryan Day is not comfortable with his punter, hey, he might go for it more on fourth down, which, hey, he should do that anyway.
That's just your opinion, Tom. I think if you have an Australian punter and you don't use him, like, why are you even in the game? As Ryan Day says, this is why you put the whistle on. That's why you put the whistle on. You go get yourself an Australian punter and you run that leg into the ground. Like you punt and you punt and you punt. Do you understand how angry Jim Tressel is at the fact that he never, like, this never occurred to him? Like, he went and got a South African place kicker. Mm-hmm. Yes. But he never went and got himself an Australian punter. And I guess it's probably good because if he had, like, Troy Smith would never have a Heisman. They're punting on third downs just because, like, look at the way it bounces at the two. This is what football is meant to be.
And, Ohio State has a long storied history of punters from way down south. Cam Johnson, Drew Chrisman, and now Jesse Mirco. So yes, I do think that was a missed opportunity. But sometimes this is the universe just conspiring to keep a man away from his destiny. Jim Tressel never having an Australian punter. It's sad, but this is life goes on.
You figure, we all have regrets. I'm sure that's one of his, but he's a bigger man than most of us, and he doesn't live in regret. So, Tom, that'll do it. We have covered now the freshman on the offensive side of the ball, the freshman on the defensive side of the ball, and also Jesse Mirco in great detail. Anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
No, I think we're out of freshmen to talk about. So the good news is we're going to have a bunch of recruiting stuff to talk about in about a week. So this is going to be this is like a legitimately exciting time. This is normally like the deadest of dead times in college football. And with the craziness coming in recruiting, it's like all of a sudden, like this is like mid-season, the amount of stuff that's going to be coming in the next month. So, and this is like really impactful stuff too. It's you've got a lot of the very first week in June, you've got a lot of the current commits coming, a lot of the guys who Ohio State thinks they can kind of push across the goal line to get them to commit. Like that's coming June 4th. So that is real soon. So yes, what is normally a quiet time of year is going to be a very, very loud, busy, exciting time of year. So that seems, Tony, like a good time of year to be a member of BuckeyeScoop.com.
Yeah, even like guys that they don't think they can get, like a Zach Rice, 5-star offensive lineman, is going to be in town. So like you're getting guys to visit that maybe you don't have the greatest shot at. Now you can increase your odds. And so we'll have updates from all of that. Tom, I won't ask who is on tomorrow's morning scoop. We'll let the listeners find that out on their own. You can thank me for that personally. Would you like to thank me right now for that?
Thank you for that, Tony.
You're welcome. So that will do it. Check out BuckeyeScoop.com as always. Check out YouTube.com/BuckeyeScoop with all of our podcasts, all of our interviews. There's a ton there. Right now, Mark has been out gallivanting around the South, so there's plenty of interviews there from some of Ohio State's top prospects, top commits, and there'll be more coming. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for watching, and we will talk to you guys later.